The grim new milestone, 250,000 deaths in the United States from COVID. The Boeing 737 MAX cleared for takeoff, and the worst passwords. Is yours on the list? Here's what you need to know. Good morning, this is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, November 19th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Good morning, Carlo.
How was your day yesterday, Jill?
It was okay. It was, cold, right? So we had a little taste of winter here in in the New York area. So
it's
always
coming.
Makes a difference.
I had a great day. I had a great day. You know why? Because I didn't catch the coronavirus, Jill. And I am excited to fulfill my goal today of also not catching the coronavirus, which will also be my goal this weekend. So I told you I was going to be annoying about this. Watch out.
Okay. So this is how we're going to start the podcast every day?
Yes.
So I was thinking about your goal, and I think it is very worthy, and I like the way you're framing the conversation. But I was also thinking about the fact that you actually don't know if you caught the coronavirus yesterday. Sure. You will know in about a week from now. If you know that, you should congratulate yourself on not catching the coronavirus last Thursday.
Yeah, you're right. I like that. It would have been very hard for me to catch it in my apartment yesterday, but I understand your point. You're right. So I'm congratulating myself. I didn't catch the coronavirus on November 5th.
Yes, like somebody like me who has to go to work every day and pass people who don't wear masks, and basically, I just am taking my life, and it's just not a great situation. I will feel good about today in 2 weeks from now. But
okay,
anyway.
Fair enough.
Okay. The U.S. death toll has surpassed 250,000, according to Johns Hopkins, which exceeds the high end of the projection made by Dr. Fauci back in March. New York City public schools, the largest system in the country, are closing indefinitely after the city breached the 3% test positivity rate. Pfizer has now revised its vaccine efficacy from 90 to 95%. So take that, Moderna, which had 94.5%. And Pfizer planning to apply for emergency authorization within days. That process from the FDA will take about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. So it means the first doses could be rolling out to frontline workers by about Christmas. Meanwhile, California's Democratic leaders are taking heavy criticism for breaking their own protocols. The governor recently attended a large semi-indoor dinner party, while earlier state lawmakers had attended a junket in Hawaii. Gavin Newsom, what are you doing? I mean, there goes your career, right?
But before we get to Newsom, Becky said yesterday when the Pfizer news came out, she was like, it reminds me of that scene in Bridesmaids where Rose Byrne and Kristen Wiig are like trying to one up each other at the engagement party. It's like, oh, yeah. Right? You think you have the most effective vaccine? Wait till you see what we say. But no, that's just incredible.
That's a great analogy. It's great. When they end up just singing, "That's what friends are for."
Great movie. Incredible film. So look, just briefly on New York City schools, and I know that this is not relevant for people who don't live here necessarily, but it's a big deal. Like you said, this is the biggest school system in the country. The reason why New York City schools are closed and restaurants are open, teachers have unions, right? Service workers don't. At least they don't really in New York. And politicians are scared of unions. They're especially scared of unions in New York City. It's a really disappointing decision, if you ask me. Again, I'm not a parent, but it just as a citizen, I just think this is a really poor, just not a good look. Once again, right, the burden ends up falling on low-income parents, on single parents, on working parents that are just trying to get through the day here. The other thing is, what is this 3% number?
3%.
We take. Yeah, 3% test positivity.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the New York City Department of Health's own website lists 5% as the number that we want to stay under. And that 5% number seems to sort of be the sort of conventional wisdom, right? Fauci, I remember he has said in a million interviews, 5%, right? 5% test positivity is what is the level that you really want to stay under. So I don't really understand where the 3% came from that is making schools close. But it is similar kind of to the Newsom story and the rest of these idiots in California breaking their own restrictions, right? It's just like it's this combination of rules for thee, not for me, arbitrary guidelines, opaque protocols, writing a book congratulating yourself on handling a pandemic that's still going on, Governor Cuomo. Yeah, our politicians are just clueless, from the federal level all the way down. And I am really rapidly losing patience with pretty much any elected official in this country right now. The lack of leadership is just astounding.
And you didn't even mention the conflicting messages in New York from the governor and the mayor. I don't know if anyone caught just what happened yesterday, but they basically held, once again, these competing press conferences. And the governor's number was under 3%. So it's a 7-day rolling average that needs to stay under that, to your point, very arbitrary 3%, because 5% was always the number. The mayor's number was 3%. The governor's was under that. The school thing, to me, is particularly troubling because forget the unions, forget your priority as a society where you say, hey, let's close schools but keep restaurants and businesses open. It goes against the science. We now have data, very, very clear data that shows that school spread is minimal, especially for younger kids, and that spread in restaurants and bars and gyms is not minimal. That's where the big spread is happening, and it's a threat. So what are we doing? It just does not make sense. It doesn't make sense science-wise. Like, forget what you're doing to working parents and the personal aspect of it. Why are we not following the science? I just don't understand.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't. To me, teachers are essential workers, right? I mean, if we're going to make like subway conductors, work, like teachers should be working. They should all be getting hazard pay, in my opinion. But it really sort of boggles the mind, and it's a big setback for this city in its recovery, and it's a little bit worrisome about what's coming.
So let's stay on the issue of politics, if we may. House Democrats nominated Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her top deputies, Congressman Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn, to lead the caucus into the Biden presidency, opting against any changes in leadership in the party despite its poor showing down ballot. Meanwhile, Georgia's recount results will be released today. They're expected to affirm that Joe Biden did win the state. A partial recount in Wisconsin, funded by the Trump campaign, is happening, but not expected to reverse Biden's win there. His refusal, though, the president's refusal to concede the election, now going on for more than 2 weeks, and it's blocking the Biden administration's ability to access materials, office space, confidential briefings, and other resources that a president-elect is entitled to by law. And even more troubling, about 70%, according to some recent polls, of Republicans think if Biden is to actually take this election, it will have been because the election was rigged and there was fraud. So
I'm glad you mentioned that. I saw that poll.
What does that do for us as a country and for just this democracy in general?
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think there was the Reuters Ipsos poll that came out yesterday and said something. It was the majority of Republicans believe that the election that Donald Trump won the election. I'm just starting to get riled up, so I'm going to take a deep breath here because it's way too early in the morning to get all riled up, Carlo. I just think that we've been...
And you have this great view behind you, which is just so serene.
Yeah, look,
I feel like you need to change your... I feel like you should face that view, and you won't feel as depressed.
It's true. Well, especially now because the sun comes up so early
now,
so you
beautiful.
Get the downtown Brooklyn view. Jill, I feel like we've just been completely inured to this. Like we're operating as a country as though this is normal. Donald Trump lost the election. He was never going to concede. Okay, that fine, right? But Republicans going along with this now for going on 3 weeks. Like, what is the end game exactly, fellas? It would be pathetic if it weren't so dangerous. But the thing and I was thinking about this last night as I was going to bed because that's my life, I guess. But what really grinds my gears about it, in addition to just the long-term damage that it's doing to democracy, it eclipses the really important fact that I think that we've all forgotten. The 2020 election was a huge success, right? We had record turnout, not just Democrats, Republicans, independents, in a pandemic, no less. That alone is astounding and a huge boon for democracy, right? It was the most secure election in history. That's according to Trump's own administration. Poll workers and volunteers, a lot of whom elderly and at risk, they worked their butts off to administer this election and count these ballots while trying not to contract a deadly disease. Fewer ballots than anyone ever thought were rejected in states like Pennsylvania because people educated themselves, on the new rules, right? We all got wiser about foreign interference on social media. It didn't really, it's probably too early to say, but it didn't seem like that was a big storyline. It didn't seem like people really fell for that in the way they may have last time. This is a huge success story. And that's what this election should be remembered for more than anything else. And instead, it's going to be remembered as the first time an American president didn't accept the will of the voters. How sad, right? How sad. Shame on anybody enabling this. None of these people should be allowed within 100 miles of public office for the rest of their lives. But the depressing thing is, it won't matter. Every single one of them will be just fine personally and politically. That is one thing that you can bet.
I don't really have anything to add.
I'm sorry. Ugh.
Well, we're going now to a story that really, as you like to say, grinds my gears, which is the Boeing story, the FAA. But this is a milestone now for Boeing. So the FAA cleared Boeing to resume flying its 737 MAX jetliner 20 months after that entire fleet was grounded after 2 deadly accidents that left 346 people dead. It will probably take months for Boeing to get the planes back in the air, and other regulatory agencies around the world still need to give their own sign-offs. The head of the FAA says he is happy with the changes Boeing made to the 737 MAX software system, which is thought to be what was behind those 2 crashes. He said, quote, "I am 100% comfortable with my family flying on it."
Yeah, I mean, you and I have been talking about this since the beginning, right? I mean, congratulations on Boeing for completing like the greatest PR coup in recent business history, right? Imagine if those 346 people were Americans. Would Boeing still be in business today?
It's a great question.
This is also look. I don't want to. Look, Boeing's a great American company, and there's great people who work there, and it's an incredibly innovative company. But they did crash these 2 planes, and other than having to put this plane on the tarmac for 20 months, I don't really know what else came of it. The other thing is, like, they still don't know. It's only half the battle, right? They don't know if people are going to get on these planes yet. I think people probably will, because I think flying is one of those things where it's just all about the price.
Totally.
Right? It's like,
and
it's so price
timing
sensitive.
and convenience.
Yeah.
You don't care at this point.
Right. Like who's making the plane. But I think the big question is, no one's flying, right? Right? Like, this thing is coming back online, but no one's going anywhere.
So I just hope that Boeing, which is so important to the U.S. economy, and also part of this duopoly with Airbus, which is based in Europe. So it's one of just 2 big plane makers, right? It's not like there's other players in this game. So I just hope Boeing has cleaned up its act, because what we learned in the aftermath of both of those crashes is troubling. It's disturbing. There were and for people who hadn't been followed it, there were engineers at Boeing who were saying that they wouldn't let their own family fly on those planes. And we've just learned about this cozy relationship between Boeing and the FAA, how it was like literally Boeing workers who were approving the plane to be flying. This whole thing, to your point, if these were Americans that were killed, and what's so egregious is, how was this plane, after the first crash, right? Considering that people in Boeing knew that there were problems with this plane after the first crash, to insist that it was still safe. And then after the second crash, Boeing, remember, was still insisting that it was safe, and Europe had grounded the planes. And even after the second crash, Boeing and President Trump were still saying, in the United States, the FAA was still saying, it's fine, nothing to see here. And then finally, they just got too much pressure and decided to ground the planes. But hopefully they have a new CEO, and I just hope culturally that they've turned things around and that this was some sort of wake-up call. But I guess we'll see. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything to add. It's just, just a really sad story, right? All those poor people, for no reason.
For no reason. And it was because like Boeing was charging extra they were making certain safety features extra, right? It's just the whole thing was so, there's, again, I'll just use the word egregious, but if you lost a loved one on one of those planes, I don't know how you get over it. And I don't know how you forgive Boeing for that. Whatever. All right. Switching gears, a big development in Hollywood. The highly anticipated sequel to Wonder Woman will debut Christmas Day, simultaneously in theaters, at least where they're still open at that point, as well as on HBO Max at no additional cost to subscribers. Wonder Woman 1984 will become the highest profile tentpole film of the year to premiere directly on a streaming service.
Yeah, this is a big deal, at least in this sort of world. Warner's hoping that a bump in new subscribers for HBO Max would outweigh whatever revenue is lost from this movie having a big theatrical run, which is just not really in the cards right now, obviously, right? HBO Max is among the more expensive of these streaming platforms. I think it's like $16 or $17 a month. So this could be a good business move if they get a bunch of new subscribers, right? For these media companies, it's all about the streaming subscribers. So I think you're going to start to see more of these, like what can they do to bring you in. With something like this, like I wouldn't be surprised if the James Bond movie eventually goes onto one of these platforms. But I think the big question is whether this is a business model, Jill, that works post-COVID. And again, another story that you and I have been talking about forever now. But are people gonna want to go back to movie theaters when there's a vaccine? Are they gonna want to see these big blockbusters, or are they gonna be like, hey, I watched Wonder Woman on my big plasma and it was great. I didn't have to get up off the couch, and like that's how I want to consume this kind of content. Going forward, I guess we'll see.
I personally think that there's going to be a huge demand. I think once things get back up to some level of normalcy, I just think there's going to be so much pent-up demand for doing anything that we used to do pre-pandemic. I think the movie theater business is going to change like everything does, and like it already was changing, right? Yeah. But I don't see the end of theaters. I think people are still going to want to experience, enjoy just a night out, going to the movies, as long as they keep throwing pounds of salt on their popcorn, I think people are going to want to go.
I've said, Jill, the first thing I'm doing when I get vaccine, I'm going to get that vaccine. I'm going to get the second shot, and then I'm going to walk right into the local Alamo Draft House. I'm going to sit in the back row with my Sour Patch Kids, and whatever's showing, I'm seeing it. By the way, on this point, you gave me that homework assignment yesterday. The Friends reunion, it is rescheduled to film in March. That's according to Entertainment Weekly, and thanks to EDJ who sent me a link to that. So that's the answer to that question. It has been rescheduled, of course, due to the pandemic. It's coming.
So as your wife, Becky, gave a great bridesmaid reference for just what's going on with Moderna and Pfizer, and I love her even more because I just love that line of thinking. Yeah. I was thinking with my crazy rant that I just had on Boeing. You listen to the Rewatchables podcast, right, with Bill Simmons?
Yeah.
So they have a category they basically rewatch old movies, and then they break them down, and they have a category for overacting, okay? And they have a category, it's called the Mark Ruffalo They Knew Award, which is Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight when he was like, they knew. And I feel like that was just me in this podcast where I was talking about Boeing and what was going on. And I'm not trying to now make light of it, but that, I don't know if you could see any of the correlation there.
I don't think because I think the difference is these are these stories that we do are they're emotional. It's hard in the news business, right? Because you're taught that you're not supposed to show emotion, right? Or you're supposed to just sort of go, and obviously there's something to that, right? But especially when it's in podcast form, I think that's okay. It's okay to be pissed about some of this stuff. We live in this country together, all of us, right? We all want the same things for our kids.
Well, no, Mark Ruffalo, in fairness, that was about sex abuse in the Catholic Church. These were all really serious things. I was talking more about my performance in it. But no, and I agree, it was just so frustrating. And I think we get kind of a front row seat to a lot of it, and we follow the play-by-plays that that most people don't. And I just remember very specifically the day after that second Boeing crash, Boeing insisting that the planes were still safe. And then
right. And you're like, they're clearly not safe. They're falling out of the sky, right? Like,
but it was just it was the subsequent reporting that found all of these whistleblowers within Boeing, and it was like worse than you could have even imagined, right? In terms of just what was known about these planes and how little was done about it. But anyway, again, I do hope for that company, and it sounds like they've learned the lesson, right? I mean, this hopefully was the turning point in terms of, and again, a hugely important company for the American economy. All right, finally, a cybersecurity firm has compiled a list of 200 passwords that it says are the worst that you can use in terms of the time it takes a computer to crack it. So they used a database of 275,000 passwords. NordPass found less than half were unique. Many of the rest were versions of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, ABC 1, 2, 3, the classic, of course, password. So if your password is on this list, I think you should probably change it.
Yeah,
there was the QWERTY, which is
QWERTY. That's a classic. Password PA55 word, one of my all-time favorites. This list, by the way, I linked to it in the newsletter if you want to check it out. The thing with passwords, I don't get how people get away with passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4 or password. Like, the rules on passwords now are ridiculous. It's like you got to have the capital letter, you got to have 2 special characters, 1 number. Can't be anything you've ever even considered using before. And then if you're lucky, you get to do the little jig, my favorite, where you have them text you another password, and then you have like a minute to put that in, or else you're locked out. Someone really needs to figure out someone needs to disrupt the password industry, big password, especially now that everything is in the cloud, right?
I don't think I've ever, I think pretty much anything I have to log into, I forget the password, and I have to go through the whole rigmarole of saying, I forgot the password. I'm totally with you. I was looking at that list of 200 passwords, though, that are the most common. Some of them are just so funny. Baseball was one, football was one. My husband's name is Michael. Michael was on it. It's like, so people are just literally writing their names. It is bizarre.
We can do better, folks.
All right, we're going to leave it there. That's what you need to know for Thursday, November 19th.
Bye, guys.